Hi guys, my name is Sara Perez, and today I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about Miami, Florida. So how many of you guys were born in Miami? And how many of you how many years have you guys lived here for those who weren't born in Miami?
15.
15?
Like 8 years.
8 years. So you guys are pretty much locals, if not, right? Because I think as long as you live more than a year or two, then you're more likely to be a local of that community, of that environment. So I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about the history of Miami and how Miami became this thriving city that we live in now. So they used to say the locals of the 1900s, Biscayne Bay Country, better yet, one of the finest building sites in Florida. So at the time when Miami was being chosen to be a city, it was just country. It was a lot of Everglade land and a lot of just swampy alligators and just not anything that you see now. And the founder of it was actually a woman. Her name was Julia Turtle, and she was a fine lady during the time she was in politics, and she knew a friend named Henry Flagler, and he was a rich roller coaster tycoon of the time. And during those times, they didn't really have a lot of cars to transport, so the main transport was train to get to New York, to LA, from New York to Miami. They needed all these railways to get around the country. And so he was in charge of the Florida East Coast Railway, and Julia is now known as the mother of Miami. Miami was created in July 28th, 1896, with 300 people as the starting population of Miami. So in the early stages of the city that we now know as Miami, it was also known as the Magic City. And I was wondering, I was like, why is it called the Magic City? And it was because they were really known for casinos. The Magic City, it was a place, a hideaway to just get away and forget about the rest of the world, the rest of the things that were going on in America at this time. And in its first year, it went from 300 to 1,681 people. And then in 1910, it went to 5,000 people of a population, up to the 1920s where there was 300,000 people living in Miami. So it just exploded. And the reason why it was because there was beaches unlike any other beaches that you could ever find on this coast of America. And you can see here in these photos of ladies in their swimsuits and a couple of the streets that Miami had during the time. And even though Miami was thriving at this point, they did have things that slowed down the growth of Miami. It was called the Great Miami Hurricane of 1926. It was a Category 4 hurricane, and as you guys may know, we're known for hurricanes, or we're hurricane central almost. It was a Category 4 hurricane, and it was the 12th most deadliest natural disaster that the United States has ever seen. And there was 373 people that were dead, and 2,500 people that were homeless at this time after the hurricane hit. So it was one of the craziest disasters that Miami had seen up until this point. And if you can imagine, during the time Miami was still growing, it was still a baby, you would say, in a city. So a lot of all of the work for these new buildings and these new facilities were just completely destroyed. And right after that was the Great Depression. So first of all, people didn't have jobs because they were homeless and they didn't really have anywhere to go. And then from that, 16,000 people became homeless from this. And as well, World War I was happening all throughout this time. So it was just a really sad time for people in this moment. And so with World War II happening right around the end of World War I, there wasn't a really big gap in between that. But it was also very good for Miami because it was thriving because many many men that were enlisting into the army came for training camp to Miami. And after that, after the World War II, people were wanting to come back to Miami because they loved it so much. It was such a different climate, such a different environment. And so, as you guys may know, Miami has a lot of different cultures, and it is especially immersed with Latin culture. And you kind of may wonder, why is this so? So is anyone Cuban here? So we have one. I am also Cuban. I'm Cuban and Mexican American. And a lot of what was happening in the 1950s was the revolution of the Cubans from Fidel Castro. That was a dictator in Cuba. And from this, people wanted to escape their homelands, and they wanted to come to a nation that was free. And so this is where the freedom flights came in. Freedom flights were airplanes that would go to Cuba, and they would come straight to Miami for immigrants that would wanted to leave their country in order to have a better life. So they had this spanned for about 7 years, and they were transporting 10,000 Cubans twice a day from Cuba to Miami, and about 400,000 Cuban refugees after the 1960s lived in Miami-Dade County after all of this. And I interviewed my grandma. My grandma actually came on the freedom flights from Cuba to Miami, and she said, I remember coming to Miami with $20 in my pocket and never looking back. Miami was a new start. So for them, it was just one of the most amazing blessings that someone could ever receive, to leave a country that was dealing with so much poverty, so much disaster, and to come into a nation that has free will, has so many opportunities. And so what also Miami is known for is the 1972 Dolphins, that were undefeated in their entire season and ended up winning the Super Bowl in 1972. An older show back in the 80s and 90s was Miami Vice, and we all know that we are famous for our beaches here, as well as our Hispanic culture. And many of you guys know these are some pictures of things that Miami has to offer. And we have Wynwood, the Sea Aquarium, Bayside, Lincoln Road in Miami, and as well as Bayfront Park, as many concerts come there. And also our famous Cuban coffee, paselitos and croquetas. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you guys learned something today. So, thank you.